From the Mohegan Sun Arena, hi, I'm Dan Kingerski on the Pittsburgh Hockey Now and the National Hockey Now YouTube channel. We're going to do the subscriber live chat here at the arena before Game 1 when the WBS Penguins, I won't call them the baby Penguins, take on the Lehigh Valley Phantoms. And the reason I'm here is purely because of Kyle Dubas. Blame Kyle, because I think when he said that we're going to take a look at Blomqvist. He's pushing for NHL ice time. We're going to take a look at how he does in the playoffs. If he can assert himself, those are Dubas's words, at that level, essentially he's here. That part I added. So I want to get my eyes on him as well. I want to see how far Blomqvist has come. He was pretty good in late January when we saw him. Let's see how he does. Lehigh Valley is going to have some NHL players in their lineup, including Bobby Brink, who played 51, I think, games with the Flyers this season. So let's see how he does. It's almost an NHL Young Stars game because the Penguins sent down a handful of guys after they failed to make the playoffs. Radim Zohorna, Jack St. Ivany, Valtteri Puustinen. So you're going to see plenty of names that you recognize in the game if you check in on the box score or even watch a little bit of it on the AHL TV. But I put out the call via private email for PHN Plus subscribers only. If you don't subscribe, I'm going to put the link down below here. Join this band of hockey media rebels. We started 5 years ago, and look how far we've come. 15 cities across the NHL, market leaders, Hall of Famers, and it blows me away. But we're here tonight to check out the AHL. Let's get to these questions. This one comes from David. He says, thanks for all you do. No, believe me, I won't say you're welcome. I'll say thank you. What should be the Penguins' number one priority this offseason? I think my priorities and the Penguins' priorities align pretty well, actually. I think it comes down to middle six scoring. Jack St. Ivany and Ryan Shea took care of the third pairing pretty well. P.O. Joseph showed himself with Chris Letang to be a solid contributor there in the top four. That's where the Penguins need to go. Middle six scoring. And I'm going to go a step further here. Just for subscribers, of course. But I think a player who could play second line center, who could fill that slot, if not immediately this coming October, then within the next 12 months. I think a player who can fill that role is vital for the Penguins this summer. Age is catching Evgeny Malkin very quickly. He started strong and he finished very strong, but he's still not the same guy that he was. I think it would be dancing with the devil or whistling, that's the expression, whistling past the graveyard if the Penguins don't go get a legitimate center this summer. A guy like Chandler Stevenson is really one I circle where he could play third line center, he could play a second line wing option, he could play second line center and do them all. Now, no one's going to put up quite the points that Malkin did unless they somehow find a way to convince Elias Lindholm to come via free agency. I think he'd be the only guy who possibly could put up the 67, 75 points over the course of a season, although he only scored in the 40s this season. So that's my priority. I think, the reason I'm here, Blomqvist, I think he takes one of those netminder positions, whether he assumes a backup role next season in the NHL and plays, say, 35 games, or he really pushes Tristan Jarry and takes, let's call it 45 games, or 45 appearances is maybe more of a 1A, because both guys are going to get pulled a few or a handful of times during the course of a season. You have to be ready. And so that's where I see the need. Everything else is pretty much covered. Let's go to Steven. Says, hey, will the Penguins get tougher? I actually think they brought a significant amount more toughness in the final 15 games. Michael Bunting adding the bit of a gritty, antagonistic sandpaper, grit in the offensive zone, getting to the net. Jack St. Ivany. St. Ivany wasn't as physical at the NHL level as he was at the AHL level, but I'll I'll kind of show you a few things he did, or tell you about a few things he did. What St. Ivany realized was he was dealing with a bigger class of player in the NHL, and he couldn't just go to the net and start tossing bodies like a bouncer. However, what he could do was take a look. He'd survey the scene very quickly, realize who was on the ice, realize who was going to be coming to the net, and confront that person 3 or 4 feet away from the cage, thus keeping the goalie's eyes clear. I thought that was pretty good from a kid who was 24, making his NHL debut late in the season. Let's get to BJ. BJ had several questions. I put a couple of his in the printed version on Pittsburgh Hockey Now. Let's see here. The one I didn't answer, well, actually here, I'll do 2 of his. Is it worth bringing back Riley Smith? $5 million plus, third line guy. Look, in an ideal world, no, you would never pay a third liner $5 million. However, guaranteed contracts, trade markets, all of those things, I think the likelihood is that Riley Smith is back with the Penguins next season. And it doesn't really matter if that's a great fit or not. It's the reality, right? And there's nothing they can really, there's nothing they can easily do about that. It's not like the NFL when you're like, okay, we're going to waive you and we're going to save 80% on the salary cap. It's just not how it works in the NHL. The second question, and I didn't put this in the printed version. We'll talk about this one. I saw this post this morning and it intrigued me. Here's a hypothetical and mock trade, my favorite. This can only get me in trouble, right? Ottawa trades Chychrun, Josh Norris, and Jonas Korpisalo to the Penguins in exchange for Erik Karlsson, Tristan Jarry, and a second-round pick. Now, that trade really only works if you're a Penguins fan who is disgruntled with Karlsson and Jarry. Josh Norris is supposed to be ready for training camp. Ottawa is not giving up easily on a 23, 24-year-old center with his kind of potential. I know this is his second, maybe third shoulder surgery for Norris, and he's missed a lot of hockey because of it. By the same time, I'm sure they'd love to dump Korpisalo, but why would the Penguins take on Korpisalo with 4 more years left on that kind of contract? I don't see it. I know you want Chychrun. I know you want rid of Erik Karlsson, but this is one of those trades that is much better on Xbox than it is in real life. Although, look, Elliot Friedman waxed about the a Chychrun for Karlsson kind of swap as well. So I'm not going to say it's entirely insane. Look, the Penguins aren't going to give up Tristan Jarry either. No, I don't think the Penguins would get enough in that deal. Only if you think Tristan Jarry is not an NHL goalie. All right, so let's jump up to Steve Nash here. Thanks for the Q&A. You're more than welcome. Poor Steven has felt left out because I do most of these from Twitter. And I'll tell you why, by the way, Steven and all the other subscribers. It's the immediacy of it. I don't always know when I'm going to have time to sit down and dedicate an hour and a half to doing video. When I see the opening, I don't have 24 or 48 hours to send out a subscriber email, collect the responses, and edit them. So that's why I use Twitter. But let's say, now I got a little bit of a book from you here, Stephen. Let's see here. I didn't put this in print either. Stephen says, I saw another respected Penguins reporter describe Tristan Jarry as immature. Do I agree? And do I think such adjectives or descriptions should be used by a beat reporter? You're going to get me in trouble. Josh Yohe is a friend of mine. I respect Josh's work more than anybody. I think Josh is probably the top dog on our beat. In fact, a little inside dirt. I sent Josh a text. I'm not sure if it was after the Island. No, it wasn't. It was after. What was the next to last game? Was it Nashville? I think, or our next to last road game. Anyway, and I just sent Yoey a text and said, it pisses me off how much better you are than me. I don't think Josh knew how to take that, but I'm going to leave Josh's characterization for Josh to affirm, defend, whatever. I'm not going to get into that. I will say, based on his dealings with the media, I can see how reporters can not enjoy them. I just ribbed Jari for a few weeks last season. In one of his answers, he kind of was really going for a vague answer, and he's like, well, winning is more important than losing. Thanks, Jars. That this song's now going to make sure I can't make any money on the video. That's not cool. But I guess the doors are opening here at Mohegan Sun Arena pretty soon. I can see where there would be friction between a reporter and Tristan Jarry, and we'll leave it at that. Let's go to the Scrivener. I think your name is Ben, right? You've been one of our original subscribers. And he asks, if Braden Yeager performs well in training camp, is there any chance they would keep him? Or is there any chance he would get a spot in the lineup? And I know you're asking a little bit out of sarcasm, but I'll tell you straight up. Yes, 110%. If Yeager, a number 1 draft pick, comes to camp next September, October, and shows that he is an NHL-ready guy, or right on that cusp, who would benefit more from being in the NHL than the WHL, he'll be here. Take into a couple things. 1, he was Kyle Dubas's first pick. 2, he was kind of high on the chain. I mean, this guy wasn't a 32nd overall pick. What was he? Where did the Penguins pick in the draft? 15th, 16th, 17th? Last season? Yeah, 14th, 15th? What? Oh, 14th, that's right. 1 spot behind Zach Benson of the Buffalo Sabres. He went 14th. So there is some expectation that he plays in the NHL. Also, Sidney Crosby will be 37. Evgeny Malkin, 38. Lars Eller, 35 during the season. And on the last year of his deal, the Penguins would do cartwheels if they could get Yeager into the NHL lineup, because they're going to need him sooner than later. Now, Joe asked me a bit of a longer question as well. Joe Onderek. Joe O. How's that? If they get Jake Gensel back, can they afford to keep Riley Smith? Joe and everybody else, I hate to pop this pipe dream that I know a lot of folks have. If they were going to keep Jake Gensel or get him back, they would have already done that. I mean, they would have done that. They would have had contract negotiations at any point from last July when they discussed it through March. And the reality is, remember, Kyle Dubas saying they didn't have a lot of conversations. Jake Gensel saying he didn't hear from Kyle since the summer. Basically, he heard from Kyle Dubas, at least on this issue, in the summer, and then a few days before being traded. That should tell you that the Penguins had made their decision last July. And actually, it was exactly what I told everybody it would be. And they were laying in wait for the trade deadline to see if the Penguins could make the playoffs. If they were going to make the playoffs, Jake Gensel was in fact going to be their rental player. I firmly believe that. And if they were out of the playoffs, as they were, 8, 9 points, 10 points, then Gensel would be trade bait, which ultimately he was. But let's play the hypothetical through. If they could get Gensel back, Gensel calls and says, God, I miss Pittsburgh. I couldn't stand barbecue in Carolina. I hate the storm surge. These uniforms are terrible. Rod Brindamore has a bad haircut. Get me out of here. I'll take your deal. Let's just say, and by the way, that's not going to happen. Where was I got a text from Dave Molinari. Gensel makes that phone call. They could, in fact, keep Riley Smith. It's only going to be a 1 year overlap. And the Penguins are going to have 10 or as much as, say, 12 or 13 million on July 1st. So, yeah, in theory, it could happen. Let's probably not. David H. says, watching from afar, the teams in the playoffs are much better than the Penguins. No one fears the Penguins' power play. The penalty kill was leaky. Sullivan believes stick-checking defensemen are the way to go. I don't know about the last part there, Dave. Obviously, the power play was, that was what it was. The penalty kill was top 10 almost the entire year. It struggled a bit without Noel Acciari in the lineup. There's no question there. And I think late in the season, they faced some fantastic power plays. I mean, Tampa Bay was, good Lord, Tampa Bay was really good. But does Sullivan tell Kyle Dubas, and before that Ron Hextall, and before that Jim Rutherford, I only want stick-checking defensemen? Well, no. I mean, don't forget the Penguins had Jack Johnson, who cleared the crease very well, and fans just pilloried him. And there's Jack St. Ivany, and there aren't a lot of guys who can become that fourth stick in the play and clear the net. You have it's a bit of a balance, and the math says a guy who can play adequate defense and add offense is more valuable than a guy who adds a lot of defense and no offense. That's what the math says. Hockey guy, eyes, I disagree. I think there's space for one or two of those guys on every roster, but that's just the way hockey is going. Think about how many teams truly have more than one guy who will break sticks around the net, break necks around the net. Most teams don't have more than one. Jack St. Ivany is going to kind of take that role for the Penguins, and the game is changing for me, for all of us, faster than I think we sometimes realize. If you take a look at yesterday, you're like, what happened? David, I think you and I both find ourselves maybe in that, because there's nobody who appreciates a fourth line grinder more than I do, and a defenseman who takes care of his goalie. But it's getting tougher to find those. I mean, look at the upcoming draft. Look at the plethora, the hundreds of kids who are 5'9", 5'10", maybe 5'11", compared to 10 years ago, 15 years ago, when everybody had to be 6'2" or 6'3". The skating, the edge work, all of that is becoming so much more paramount. Positional defense is becoming much more important, just because positional defense allows you to transition faster. I'm not going to put that on Mike Sullivan. I'm just telling you that's where the game is. And I know, it kind of takes away a bit of that satisfaction. It's like losing the true run game in football, isn't it? Let's see here. Mr. Wagner. Steve from Oklahoma. Steve saw the direct comparisons when the Penguins traded Gensel, getting Bunting as the NHL player back, to that James Neal for Patrick Hornquist. I don't think it's quite as dynamic as that trade, but yeah, it has shades of it, no question. And he says, please remind folks that Jim Rutherford's first year was flawed as well. One of the Penguins people that I trust kind of mentioned the same thing, Steve, that Dubas kind of came in late. He made logical decisions without truly knowing some of the hidden flaws, like relying on Chris Letang to be more of a defensive guy. On paper, sure. It's a little tougher in reality than it was, than it was on paper. expecting more from Evgeny Malkin or expecting more from different players and how they truly fit into the Penguins universe, you can look at all the spreadsheets you want for the few weeks that Kyle Dubas had. That's really all he had, by the way. When did he start? Like June 10th, June 15th or something? So he only had a few weeks. And maybe he didn't truly understand all of the nuance of the Penguins, and that's why you get a Riley Smith or a Ryan Graves. But you're right, Jim Rutherford made the same sort of mistakes back in 2015. And last question comes from Ross. More of a statement. Notices a trend of the Penguins giving up those leads and thinks it's because of age. And I wrote this in the print version as well. Look at the teams that gave up a lot of leads, who were actually in the playoffs. The Islanders, the Bruins. The Minnesota Wild were in that top 6 with the Penguins too. And those teams aren't aged. I mean, the Islanders aren't young, but they're not old. The Bruins, not young, but not old anymore. You know, having lost David Krejci and Patrice Bergeron. I would call them a middle-of-the-road age team, or at least an appropriately aged team. So I don't think we're going to chalk this up to age. And the other teams who were really bad at giving up leads were all young and bad teams. San Jose, Chicago, Columbus, and I'm missing somebody else. But I think it comes down to mindset. I think it comes down to confidence in keeping the lead and confidence in yourself to hold the lead. I think the Penguins took dumb chances when they had the lead, feeling like they had to get a couple extra goals to put it away, not trusting themselves. And, I mean, let's be real here. When you've got a roster, Evgeny Malkin can play some pretty good defense. It's not his forte. Erik Karlsson, certainly not his forte. Chris Letang is dynamic. He can be a little bit mistake prone. P.O. Joseph is not a guy who is going to rattle skulls around the cage. So he has to play very good positional defense. When the other team gets very desperate and throws 2 and 3 bodies, now the Penguins need forwards and defensemen to start tossing bodies away from the net, and they're not necessarily as strong or equipped to do that. And the number of Penguins other players, Ricard Raquel and other players, I hate to start tossing guys under the bus, but Riley Smith and all these other players might be passable in the defensive zone, but they're not great in the D zone, and so they were soft defensively. The other team turns the dial to 11 to come after it. Could the Penguins withstand all of that? They could use a few more rock rib defensive players, one more rock rib defensive guy on the blue line, maybe one more or two more in the lineup. All right, that's it. You hear Blues Traveler and John Popper behind me. That's it for me from Mohegan Sun. I'll put this up here this evening on, what day is today? Wednesday. All right, kids, thank you so much for participating. I appreciate every single one of you. Subscribers, you've got my email address. Reply to that anytime, and you can, happy to answer any questions, start a conversation, or, hey, why this, why that? I don't like this. Let me know. All right, have fun. We'll talk soon.